They say the plains of Colorado don't echo, but Red Rock Hollow has never played by nature's rules. It was the sound that woke Olivia Holt that first morning in June. A faint whispering. Not wind, not birds, not her father's heavy steps on the wooden porch. Just whispers, steady and cold, drifting up from the barn below like fog through a keyhole. They weren't words, not at first, just numbers, a soft, breathless counting. 0, 1, 2, 3. Nothing was inside that barn except hay, tools, and the dust of unspoken memories. But something, someone, was counting. Dean Holt, a man of few words and even fewer emotions, had heard them too. He'd been up since before sunrise, staring through the cracked window of the kitchen with coffee long gone cold. Olivia found him like that, still in his nightshirt, eyes locked on the silhouette of the barn as if it might speak next. He didn't flinch when she touched his shoulder. "You hear it too," she whispered. He only nodded once. Red Rock Hollow was never on any official map. It existed in a gully south of Pueblo, where the land curled in on itself like a wound healing wrong. In 1861, just months into the war that would divide the country, it was one of those places settlers found by accident and never left. The soil was red, iron-rich and hard as stone in summer, but it grew corn and beans if you were stubborn enough. Dean Holt was. He'd come west after a fire took his wife and first son in Tennessee. Olivia, barely 4 at the time, had survived only because she'd fallen asleep in the shed that night. They never spoke of the fire. Dean bought the land with a government voucher and built the house with his own hands. The barn came next, bigger than necessary, sturdy with a loft and trap door no one used anymore. They kept no livestock, only a mule named Franklin, too old to care about anything except apples and shade. On June 2nd, the counting stopped at 117. The next morning, it reached 278. By June 4th, Olivia swore she heard 2 voices. They didn't overlap. They alternated. First one, breathy and slow, then the other, faster, childlike. The counting restarted from 0 each day at precisely 4:13 a.m. and ended just before sunlight crested the ridge. Olivia began recording the numbers in a ledger she found in her mother's old trunk. Her father didn't protest. He just nailed the barn doors shut from the outside and tied Franklin's feed trough to the fence far from the structure. It didn't help. The whispers passed through walls. There were no tracks in the dirt, no handprints, no signs of animals or vagrants. Pastor Roy March from the Ridge Church came down on the 5th after Dean sent word. A lean, hollow-eyed man with a failing leg and a black Bible that looked more used than any man's shoes. "You say the voices count upward?" he asked, over tea Olivia hadn't touched. "Every day the same start time?" Dean nodded. "And always from 0? "Always," Olivia said, finally looking up. "It's like they're measuring something, like they're watching us and waiting." The pastor made no jokes. He asked to sleep on the porch that night with his ear toward the barn. They let him. By morning, he looked older. His hands shook as he lit a pipe, something he'd sworn off 20 years ago. "They're not just counting," he whispered. "They're remembering." He didn't explain. Instead, he asked when the barn was built. "May of 58, Dean said. "Started after the first thaw." The pastor paled. "And before that?" "Nothing," Dean said. "Just land." The old man stared long at the barn, then at Olivia. Nothing wasn't always empty. Some land remembers, some land punishes. But it was the pastor's last remark before leaving that stayed with Olivia long after he disappeared into the ridge mists. "If the counting ever stops on a round number," he said without turning back, "run." And then, on June 6th, the whispers stopped on exactly 500. Olivia didn't run. Neither did her father. Instead, They waited. She sat at the edge of her bed that morning, bare feet on cold wood, staring at the barn through the lace-framed window. The sun rose like it always did. No smoke, no fire, no blood. But there was something wrong with the silence. The barn wasn't whispering, but the air around it buzzed faintly, like a storm far off that didn't know it was late. Even the birds kept their distance. Dean didn't speak the entire day. He moved through his chores like a man underwater, feeding Franklin, chopping wood, but never once passing near the barn. When Olivia approached the edge of the field near sundown, he raised a hand sharply. "Not today," he said without looking at her. "Not today, girl." His voice was rough, hoarse, used only for warnings now. That night, Olivia dreamed of numbers, not just counting, but a flood of digits, rolling across the sky, stacking up against the horizon like thunderclouds. A voice, soft and sexless, recited them endlessly in her ear. When she woke, her pillow was damp, and the whispers had returned, but different. No counting, just a single phrase, repeated like breath through the cracks. "The door's ready." She ran to her father's room. He was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed, the shotgun across his knees. "I heard it," he muttered before she could speak. "God help me, I heard it too." That was the first time he loaded the shells. The next morning, they ventured together to the barn. The boards Dean had nailed shut remained sealed, but the hinges looked newer, cleaner, as if oiled in the night. Olivia pressed her palm to the wood. It was cold, impossibly cold, like touching something that wasn't truly there. Dean yanked her back. "We burn it tonight," he said flatly. "It's not ours anymore." But the fire never came. At sundown, the sky turned red, not with sunset, but a dense, simmering crimson hue that seemed to press down on the world. Olivia watched her father try 3 times to light the torch. Each match sparked, flared, and died in still air. No wind, no rain, just refusal. Fire wouldn't take. Not that night, not from their hands. That evening, Franklin began to scream. The mule had never made a sound louder than a stubborn grunt in its entire life. But around midnight, it brayed like something was being torn from its body, crashing against the fence, kicking into the air. When Olivia and Dean reached the yard, Franklin was covered in sweat, eyes wide, staring, not at the barn, but at the house. "He saw something," Olivia said. Dean didn't answer. He walked to the trough, dumped the water, and grabbed the old cross from the porch, a simple thing, carved by Olivia's mother long before the fire. Dean hadn't touched it in years. That night, he planted it in the soil between the barn and the house. Neither of them slept. The next morning, June 8th, the barn door was open. No sign of damage, no broken nails. The wood lay neatly to the side, as if it had never been fastened shut. Inside, the air was thick and still. Olivia stepped forward, ignoring her father's frantic whisper to stay back. The hay was untouched, the tools unmoved, but at the very center of the barn, on the old wooden floor, someone, or something, had carved a circle. Inside it were symbols, sharp, perfect, etched cleanly as if by metal, not letters, not numbers. Something older, something that didn't care to be understood. Olivia knelt, her breath catching. At the edge of the circle, in perfect English, were 5 words. "We only count what listens." Dean pulled her back hard. "We leave. Today." His voice cracked. "I don't care where we go." But Olivia looked once more at the circle, and in that moment she swore she heard something. Beneath the whispers, behind the symbols, breathing, and it sounded exactly like her mother. She didn't tell Dean that part, not at first. He was already half mad with dread, and she needed him steady. But the sound haunted her. It hadn't been a memory or some trick of grief. She was certain of it. The breath was slow and deliberate, like someone sleeping peacefully beneath the floorboards. The kind of sound you only noticed when everything else went dead silent. The kind that didn't belong in a barn. Dean spent the rest of the day packing. By afternoon, the wagon was filled with food, bedding, and tools. He nailed a cross to the front gate and told Olivia to be ready by nightfall. But she hesitated. There was a gravity to the barn now, like it had become the center of something ancient and unyielding. And worse still, Olivia couldn't shake the pull. It wasn't curiosity, it was recognition, like she had always been meant to find that circle. While Dean slept, exhausted on the porch, she crept back. Inside, the barn was darker than before. Not the kind of darkness that comes from absence of light, but the kind that feels dense, crowding the air, slowing your thoughts. The circle was still there, but something had changed. It was wet, glossy, as if freshly carved, though she had seen it dry just hours ago, and then she noticed something new. A handprint, small, child-sized, pressed into the dust just outside the etched ring. She hadn't been a child in over a decade, and she hadn't touched that floor. The whispering returned, closer this time, not in her ears, but beneath her ribs, like a voice curling through her spine, threading syllables directly into her marrow. "Welcome back," it said. A phrase as familiar as her own name, yet she had no memory of ever hearing it before. It wasn't just sound. It was intention. She turned and ran, stumbling out into the yard, slamming the door behind her. Dean startled awake and grabbed the shotgun, wild-eyed. "It's calling to me," Olivia whispered, more to herself than to him. "It knows me." That night she told him about the breath, about the sound like her mother. Dean didn't blink. He stared into the fire and nodded once. "I've heard it too," he said finally. "Not since last week, but I wasn't sure. Thought it was just my mind breaking in slow pieces." He looked at her then, his face gray with something deeper than fear. "But if you're hearing it too, we waited too long." The next morning, the circle was gone. Not erased, not hidden, gone. The floor was clean, unmarked, the dust undisturbed. Dean threw open the doors at first light, shotgun raised, but nothing waited inside. No symbols, no handprints, only hay and quiet. Olivia stepped in cautiously, expecting the breath, the whispers, something. But the barn was silent. Dean closed the doors behind them, and in that instant, the light changed. It wasn't sudden. It was more like a dimming of something unspoken. Olivia looked up. The windows were still open, the cracks in the wall unchanged, but the shadows had deepened, stretching too long for morning, pooling like ink in corners that should have been bright. Then they saw it. Words scrawled across the back wall in long, uneven strokes. Not carved, written, as if someone had dipped a hand in oil and dragged it over the wood. "Where do the lost go when they are found?" Dean raised the shotgun. "Out," he growled. "Now." But the barn didn't let them leave. The door wouldn't budge. Not stuck. Sealed, as if the wood itself had forgotten how to open. Dean slammed the butt of the gun against it, then again, harder. Olivia turned toward the whisper. It was back, but it wasn't counting. It was laughing, quiet, thin laughter, layered, like multiple voices overlapping in perfect, sinister harmony. Olivia pressed her palms to her ears, but the sound was inside, not just her head. Her bones. Dean fired at the door. The echo didn't come, because in that barn, echoes didn't exist. The sound of the blast died before it lived. It was as if the barn swallowed noise as quickly as it made it. The shotgun clattered to the floor and Dean stared at the door, not broken, not splintered, untouched. Olivia backed toward the center of the barn where the circle had been. It was still gone, but the wood beneath her feet felt soft now, like skin stretched too thin. She knelt, pressed her palm down, and recoiled. Warm. The floor was warm. Dean grabbed her arm. "We're getting out. Window if we have to." But the windows wouldn't open either. The hinges held firm. The glass refused to break. He struck them with the butt of the gun, then with the edge of the shovel. Nothing, just dull thuds and that oppressive silence. No vibration, no sound of impact, as if the very idea of escape had been forgotten by the structure. Then the floor beneath them pulsed. Olivia gasped. Not a tremor, not an illusion, a real rhythmic swell beneath the boards, like something breathing deep under the foundation. Dean froze, his eyes wide, lips pale. "Did you feel that?" he asked. "Yes," Olivia said. "It's alive." That was when the light began to bleed. It didn't come from the windows or cracks. It came from the seams between the floorboards. Thin veins of red light, soft at first, then brighter, pulsing with the same rhythm as the floor's breath. It wasn't fire. It wasn't lantern glow. It was colder than either, and it was spreading. The light curled up the walls, traced symbols that hadn't been there before. Olivia watched in horror as the old planks spelled messages they couldn't understand, marks that shimmered briefly, then vanished like steam off snow. Dean fell to his knees. He didn't cry out. He just knelt and stared at the boards like a man kneeling before an altar he never built. Olivia ran to him, gripped his shoulders, but he didn't move. His lips were moving, whispering. She leaned in. 11, 12, 13. He was counting. She shook him. "Stop it, Dad, don't say those numbers." But he didn't hear her. 16, 17. His voice matched the rhythm of the floor. The pulsing light grew faster with each number. Olivia's hands trembled. "You said we had to run," she whispered, tears forming. "You said if it ended on a round number?" And then it hit her. It wasn't about the number it stopped on. It was who finished it. Dean's voice faltered at 37. His lips froze, eyes glazed. Olivia clutched his face. "Stop," she begged. "Please stop counting." But he was gone. Breathing, but blank, empty, like something had finished being written inside him. She dragged him toward the barn door, screaming now, pounding, trying everything. The laughter had returned, higher, faster, echoing now, not around her, but within her. It vibrated inside her chest, like a memory trying to break loose. Then came the whisper, close, behind her ear. "You're next." She turned. Nothing there. And yet, everything was. She felt the presence then. Not a person, not a thing, just presence, like being stared at by a thought too large to fit inside a name. Olivia backed into the corner of the barn, cradling her father's limp body. The whisper came again. "Do you remember now?" She didn't, but something inside her did. She looked at the wall. The writing had changed again. Now it bore English words, scratched deep and trembling. "You were here before. You told us to wait." Her throat closed. The barn pulsed again. Once, then silence. The red light vanished. The boards cooled. Dean stirred. He blinked slowly, like waking from a year of sleep. "Ollie," he rasped. "What happened?" Before she could answer, the door creaked. Not from outside. From within. A second door, one that had never existed before. It stood at the back of the barn, where no wall had ever broken before. Tall, narrow, built of pale wood with a black handle that gleamed without light. It was already open an inch. Dean stared at it like a man watching the mouth of a cave breathe, his face twisted. Not in fear, but in recognition. Olivia saw it, that brief flicker of familiarity in his eyes, as though somewhere in the forgotten rooms of his mind he had seen that door before. "Don't," she whispered, though she didn't know which of them she was speaking to. The light outside the barn had changed again, flat, grey and toneless, like the sky before a tornado. No shadows, no movement, just an unnatural stillness that pressed against the windows. Olivia stepped forward. The air near the door was thick. It smelled faintly of lilies and burnt sugar, her mother's scent. Dean's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "No further," he said. His voice was back, weak but clear. "That door wasn't made for us." "Then who is it for?" Olivia whispered. "Why is it here?" Dean didn't answer. The door pulsed. It didn't open wider, didn't move. But something behind it shifted. A shadow passed over the floor, soft and long, as if cast by something standing just beyond. Olivia's heart pounded. She took another step, slowly. "You saw this before, didn't you?" she asked Dean. "Back in Tennessee. Before the fire." Dean's face went pale. "Don't say that," he hissed. "That's not yours to remember." "But I do," Olivia said, surprised at the certainty in her voice. "Not everything, just pieces." She placed her palm on the smooth wood. It wasn't cold. It felt like skin. Breathing. And the second her hand touched it, the barn changed again. The walls groaned like old lungs inflating. The boards twisted, realigning themselves into impossible angles. The roof vanished. Not exploded, not lifted, just disappeared, revealing a sky black as ink, moonless and too close. Stars moved there, fast and slow at once, drawing shapes no human eye could trace. Olivia stumbled back. The door opened another inch. From behind it came the counting again. Soft, familiar. 0, 1, 2. But it wasn't a whisper this time. It was her voice. Dean gripped her shoulders. "You don't remember what we buried, Olivia. What you buried." "I didn't," she started, but stopped. Something inside her cracked, a memory, not seen but felt. Wood, smoke, children laughing. And then silence, long silence, and the first whisper, a bargain. "We were supposed to forget," she said, barely audible. "We did," Dean said. "But the land didn't." The voice behind the door continued. 7, 8, 9. Olivia pressed her forehead against the door. The voice sounded younger, hers, but 10 years back. "They counted because I told them to," she said. "I told them it mattered." Dean nodded grimly. "You were the first, before the fire, before you were mine to raise. You were theirs." "What are they?" Olivia asked. Dean looked up at the barn's yawning ceiling, the stars in patterns no human should see. "Their memory," he said. "What we bury wrong, what we swear never happened." The door creaked louder, then it spoke again, this time in her father's voice, a younger version, weeping, pleading. "Please take her instead, just let the boy go." Olivia gasped. She remembered. Her brother, not the one who died in the fire, one before that, one no one had spoken of, because he wasn't supposed to exist. Dean crumpled to his knees. "I tried," he whispered. "God forgive me. I tried to fix it, but bargains don't burn, they wait." The door was open wide enough now to see what lay beyond. A field, black grass, a tree with no leaves, and beneath it, children stood in a circle, facing outward, all still, all waiting. One of them looked just like Olivia. The whisper reached through once more. "It's your turn." Olivia didn't move. Her feet rooted themselves to the barn floor, but everything else inside her began to drift, her thoughts, her breath, her memories. The child beneath the tree who bore her face didn't blink. None of them did. They stood like statues formed from grief, arms at their sides, expressions blank as the sky above them. The circle they made around the tree pulsed faintly with light, a dull red hue that matched the glow once seen beneath the barn's floorboards. It wasn't a vision. It was a place, real and near. Dean rose shakily, placing himself between Olivia and the door. "You don't have to go," he said. "You were a child. What happened then wasn't your doing. They tricked you." But Olivia's voice was hollow. "I invited them. I said yes. I thought they were my friends. Behind the door, the child who looked like her opened her mouth and spoke. The sound didn't travel through the air. It unfolded inside Olivia's skull, a perfect memory long denied. "You promised we could stay," the voice said. "You promised we'd keep counting. That's how we'd stay real." Dean recoiled, horror etched in his features. "Don't listen. That voice isn't hers. It's what they use." "No," Olivia whispered. "It is hers. It's mine." Dean shook his head violently. "I buried the ledger. I burned the other drawings. I prayed for years to keep them gone, but they were never gone. They just went quiet. And you, God help me, I thought you'd forget too." Olivia walked past him, toward the door. "I remember the ledger," she said, eyes fixed on the field beyond. "It wasn't just numbers. I made stories, names, gave them faces. They were mine. I didn't want to be alone." The child version of herself stepped from the circle. "None of the others moved. I said I would count to 1,000,000, the girl whispered. And they said, 'We'll help you.'" Dean reached for her, but the barn pulled him back. Not physically, but with weight, like the grief of all he'd hidden became chains, dragging him to his knees. "You can't go," he rasped. "You won't come back." Olivia looked down at him. "I was never back," she said. "Not really." And then she crossed the threshold. Immediately the air changed. Time twisted sideways. 1 second she stood in the barn, then she was among the children. They didn't look at her. They didn't move. They stood guard around the dead tree, each one whispering numbers in unison, softly, like a lullaby. She turned toward the one that looked like her. The girl smiled. "We kept it safe. Everything you gave us. It's still here." Olivia felt something heavy in her hands. She looked down. The ledger. Its cover was cracked, stained with something darker than ink, but it was hers. She flipped it open. The first page still bore her careful script, written when she was only 6. "If I name them, they are real." The pages that followed contained hundreds of entries. Some were names she remembered. Others she didn't. Some were crossed out. One bore a smear of blood across the corner, a tiny handprint beneath it. "I tried to forget you," Olivia said softly. The other children finally turned toward her. All at once, a wave of pale faces and hollow eyes. One by one, they whispered the same question. "Will you start again?" She looked at the tree, the circle beneath it, the place where she once sat and made a world that listened only to her. "I don't know how to stop," she said. The wind shifted, and the counting resumed. Not from 0, from 501. Somewhere back in the barn, Dean screamed her name. The sound didn't reach her. The door behind her shrank, then vanished entirely, as if it had never been there. The children closed the circle, and the breath beneath the ground began again. It came slow, measured, inhale, exhale, like the rise and fall of a tide too ancient to belong to time. Olivia stood inside their ring, the ledger clutched against her chest. Every child's gaze rested on her, not in expectation, but in stillness. She was not being watched. She was being awaited. The grass beneath her bare feet moved subtly, not with wind, but with intention, each blade parting to reveal traces of symbols etched in soil, spirals, slashes, crescents. Not language, but purpose. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Her mouth formed words her mind hadn't offered. "I am Olivia Holt," she said, "and I remember." The wind stopped. The black tree groaned. A sound like rust cracking through bone echoed overhead, and the branches twisted. Not by breeze or storm, but like something inside the trunk had shifted, stretching upward towards something that didn't exist. Olivia looked up. The stars above were gone now. In their place was a ceiling of eyes, wide, lidless, and blinking one after another in a slow, watching rhythm. The children didn't flinch. They only began counting again. 501, 502, 503. Their voices were layered. Some clear, some raspy, some didn't even sound like voices at all. Olivia stepped forward, and the circle widened for her. The children made no gesture, no movement. They simply shifted without shifting, giving her room to reach the tree. Its bark was blackened, yet when she placed her hand against it, it felt like stone warmed by sun. Within its surface, grooves pulsed faintly. More writing, and again she saw her own marks. Her letters. Olivia Holt had once carved her name into this tree. She didn't remember doing it, but the tree remembered. Behind her, the voice of the younger Olivia returned, speaking calmly from within the crowd. They didn't go away. You gave them names, and they became. Became what? Olivia asked, turning. The child tilted her head. That depends on how you finish the story. From beneath the ground, something rose. Not physically, but emotionally. A pull, like grief catching in the chest, like the ache before tears. The black grass bent outward in a spiral, and in its center, a hatch appeared. Round, wooden, iron-ringed, the kind of hatch a person builds to be forgotten. Olivia's fingers trembled as she reached down. The hatch opened before she touched it. Inside was only darkness, and yet noise, not screams, not whispers, a deep thrum, like 1,000 heartbeats all aligned, beating as one. "What's down there?" she whispered. The child that was her smiled gently. "The ones you didn't finish. The ones you left half-made. They're still counting, still waiting. I didn't mean to forget them. But you did." Dean Holt's voice called from somewhere far off, muffled, strained, like shouting through water. Olivia turned, but there was no barn, no door, just the circle, the tree, the hatch. The children chanted louder now. 508, 509, 510. And then a change. Not in volume, but in tone. A new number, 511. But this time, it wasn't spoken by them. It was her. The ledger glowed in her hands, dim red ink rising through the pages, lines rewriting themselves in real time. One child stepped forward from the ring. A boy, pale, freckles. No shoes, his eyes wide with that same unblinking stare. "You named me," he said softly. "I was the one in the attic." Olivia dropped to her knees. She remembered. The attic of the old house. A game. She'd made him from shadows and broomsticks and pieces of stories her mother told by candlelight. He was supposed to protect her from nightmares. Instead, he became one. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know it mattered." He knelt beside her. "It always matters." The hatch pulsed again. The children looked down, and the counting stopped. It was not silence that followed, it was absence. The kind of quiet that felt like something listening, breathing, waiting in the spaces between sound. Olivia stared into the black mouth of the hatch. No stairs, no ladder, only descent. Impossible, bottomless, but not empty. She could feel it watching her, not with eyes, but with need. The ledger in her arms grew heavier. The boy beside her touched the edge of the opening. "This is where the unfinished go," he said. "The forgotten, the ones who waited too long." His voice was steady. "Kind. You gave us form," he added. "Now you must give us rest." Olivia looked at him, her eyes wet. "How?" The other children gathered around the hatch, forming a new circle. Tighter. Closer. The girl that looked like Olivia stepped forward and held out her hand. "You must name what you took," she said, "and finish what you began. I don't remember all their names. You will." And then they began to chant. Not numbers this time, but syllables. Strange, unfamiliar. Some were almost words, others were fragments of laughter, tears, breath, the language of things born in dark places. Olivia held the ledger tighter. Its pages turned on their own, faster and faster, as ink lifted into the air and formed shapes around her. There were faces in the dark, flickering images, children half-formed, some with eyes but no mouths, others with hands that ended in smudges. She recognized none of them, yet knew them all. She had drawn them once, alone in the barn, on scraps of paper or in dust, whispering to herself as she gave each one a name, and when she grew tired of them, she'd forgotten. But they had not. Olivia knelt beside the hatch and whispered the first name that came to her lips. Marley. A soft breath stirred from below. Then another. Ellis. A hum began, low and deep, vibrating through the ground. Tom, she said. Cassia, Benji, Ruth, Lion. With each name, the hatch pulsed and the faces around her began to fade, slowly, gently, as if released from a long-held breath. The children watched in silence, their eyes glassy, but still. But then the pages stopped turning. One name remained. She hadn't written it. It was burned into the back cover of the ledger, etched with something not ink, something darker. Her hand trembled. Dean. Her voice failed at first. She tried again. Dean Holt. The world bent. The hatch widened, and beneath the surface of the ground, a scream erupted, not of pain, but of refusal, a howl of broken promises, of bargains breached. The children flinched. Some cried. The boy beside her stood protectively, but the scream was not meant for them. It was for her, because the final name wasn't meant to be released. It was meant to be claimed. From the black grass, a figure rose. Tall, wrong, as if stitched from shadows and smoke, its limbs bent against sense. No eyes, no face, only a maw where the chest should be, and inside it a flicker of red, the same red that once pulsed beneath the barn. Olivia didn't move. The figure spoke in a voice made of many. You made him forget. You bound him in silence. You buried what he was. I was trying to save him, she whispered. There is no salvation in unfinished stories. The children surrounded her now, hands clasped, voices rising. They were chanting again, but this time in defense. The figure stepped back, faltering. From the hatch, a new sound rose, a single voice. Dean. I remember, he said, his voice torn with grief. I remember her before she was mine. I remember who she was before she had a name. The figure let out a second scream, higher, sharper. Olivia turned toward the hatch. Light was rising from within it now, blinding, gold, alive. I didn't make him forget, Olivia whispered. I gave him a second chance. And then she jumped. She fell through darkness, not down, but inward, folding through memory, collapsing into layers of her own forgotten self. The air was thick, velvet-like, pulsing against her skin with every breath. Light and shadow spiraled around her in impossible geometry. She didn't fall far. She fell deep, and when the falling stopped, she was not on ground, but suspended, weightless in a space that had no horizon. Around her, the whispers returned, not menacing now, but mournful. Soft voices spoke her name as if mourning it. Olivia, Olivia Holt, Olivia who was, Olivia who never was. And then, stillness. She stood in a room. It was small, wooden, and oddly familiar. Sunlight filtered through a single dusty window. On the wall, drawings, dozens of them, children, creatures, names scrawled in crayon. And in the center of the room, a girl sat cross-legged on the floor, humming softly, cradling the ledger in her lap. She looked up when Olivia approached. It was her. Younger. 7, maybe 8. Eyes wide, hopeful, but rimmed with a sadness that didn't belong on any child. I used to pretend, the girl said, that if I named things, they'd never leave. Olivia knelt beside her. Why did we stop pretending? Because someone told us it was dangerous, that we made things too real. The child traced a finger over one of the names in the book. But I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I know, Olivia said. But we did. The little girl nodded. They were lonely too. The room trembled slightly. Dust fell from the rafters. "They're waiting," the girl whispered. "For what?" "For you to make it right." Olivia looked around. The room wasn't just familiar. It was exact, her old room, the one lost in the Tennessee fire. But here, untouched, preserved by memory, or something older than memory. She walked to the window and looked out. The field was there. The children. The black tree. But something had changed. There was movement beyond the circle now, figures pacing just outside the perimeter, shapes without shape, faces without form, the unfinished ones, the echoes that refused silence. They circled, murmuring in broken patterns. "They want back in," the child Olivia said from behind her. "They want to be counted again." "But we can't let them," Olivia whispered. "No." The child stood and held out the ledger. "You have to close the book." Olivia took it. Her hands shook. The pages inside had changed, no longer names and numbers, but images, each child she had ever created, drawn in detail, each with a story, some smiling, some crying, some with mouths sewn shut, all of them waiting, and in the very back, a single blank page remained. Not white, black, inkless, hollow. Olivia understood. To finish a story meant to let go, to accept that not all things survive imagination. Some must be buried, fully. She touched the page. The ledger burned, not with flame, but light. Gold and violet surged through the room, and the child beside her smiled. "Thank you," she whispered. The room dissolved. The floor fell upward. Olivia rose with it, back through memory, back through breath, back through herself. And then, the barn. She lay on the floorboards, gasping. Dean was beside her, clutching her hand. The door to the field was gone. The whispers had ceased. No breath beneath the floor. Only wind, only light. Outside, the sun had risen over Red Rock Hollow. The air was clean. Still. Olivia sat up slowly. Dean cupped her face. "You came back," he said, voice cracking. "I remembered," she said, "and I let them go." And then they both turned to the far corner of the barn, where the ledger once lay. It was gone, but carved into the wood, deep and final, were 5 words. No more names, just silence. Dean traced the letters with his fingers, trembling. The groove in the wood was warm to the touch, like something still alive had written it just moments before. He looked at Olivia, unsure of what had truly happened, or what she had brought back with her. Her eyes were dry but distant, as if some part of her had not returned, or perhaps something else had taken its place. She stood slowly, brushing hay from her dress, her hands still faintly glowing with heat. Neither spoke for a long while. Outside, the air felt too still. Birdsong returned, faint and hesitant, like nature itself was testing its voice after too long in shadow. The barn no longer groaned, the boards no longer pulsed, but the sense of presence, that heavy, unspoken awareness, lingered just beneath the skin of the morning. Dean closed the door gently, wincing as the hinges creaked. "It's over?" he asked softly. Olivia didn't answer. She stepped into the center of the barn, where once the circle had been. The floor was whole now. No hatch. No light, but as she knelt, she saw it. Beneath a thin layer of dust, a faint outline remained. Not the symbols, just the space. A memory etched into grain. She placed her palm against it, then pulled it back sharply. It was cold again. Not pulsing, but cold. "I don't think it's over," she said finally. "I think it's resting." Dean's eyes darkened. "Then we should go. Leave this place for good." She turned to him. "You think we can leave something like this behind?" "I thought we already did once," he said, and that finally broke the silence between them. Because they had. In Tennessee. With fire. With false names and new beginnings. With prayers spoken over ashes. But the truth never really burned. It burrowed. It waited. They left the barn, locking the doors, even though they both knew it was symbolic at best. Dean hitched Franklin to the wagon, hands moving through the old routine like muscle memory soaked in guilt. Olivia packed only what she needed: a few clothes, a book of psalms her mother once read, and the smallest drawing she had ever made, a rough sketch of a smiling child, one with no name. By noon, they were gone from Red Rock Hollow. And for a while, things were quiet. 2 months passed without event. Dean took odd jobs in a town called Stillwater. Olivia worked in the churchyard, tending graves and helping with ledgers. She never spoke of the barn, or the door, or the children. But sometimes she would hum, softly, a tune no one recognized. The older parishioners said it gave them chills. One night in August, Pastor Roy March visited Dean's quarters, holding a piece of paper. "This came for you," he said. Dean took it. No envelope, no sender, just a torn scrap. On it, written in perfect childlike script, were 4 words. "We're not finished yet." Dean didn't sleep that night. He watched Olivia by lamplight, her face calm in dreams, but her hands moved slightly, fingers twitching like they were drawing something in the air. In the morning, she rose early, and she had no memory of the note. That day, she asked to visit the old well on the church grounds. She said she had dreamed of it. Dark stone, water that whispered. Pastor March hesitated, but agreed. They found her there an hour later, standing at the edge, eyes closed, whispering names under her breath. None of them were in the town records, none of them were real, but the ground around the well felt warmer than it should, and the birds, once returned, had vanished again. Dean stood behind her, a lump in his throat. "Ollie?" he said softly. She didn't turn. She only whispered one more name, a name he hadn't heard since the fire, a name no living soul should have remembered. And deep beneath the well, something whispered back. Dean didn't hear the name, not entirely, only fragments, like syllables caught in wind. But Olivia did. She opened her eyes slowly, pupils wide, unmoving. Her lips were pale, her hands still. Then she whispered something to the water, 3 words, quiet but deliberate, the same phrase she had once etched into the barn floor in invisible ink. "I'm still here." The echo that answered was not hers. It was hers. The girl-child version, the one who stood beneath the black tree, who kept the names and counted the forgotten. Her voice had returned, not just to Olivia's mind, but into the world, as though memory had taken shape again and stepped back into place. Dean approached slowly. "Ollie, come away from the edge." But she didn't move. The wind shifted. And then, an impossible sound. A soft laugh from inside the stone well, coming not up but out, as if the structure itself had inhaled and now exhaled something that had waited far too long. Pastor March crossed himself. "What is this?" he asked, voice brittle. Dean's answer was quiet. "It's something we thought we buried." Olivia knelt beside the well, placing her hand on the rim. "She's not angry," she said. "She's curious. She wants to know what happened after we stopped counting." Pastor March backed away. "Miss Holt, I think we ought to pray." But Olivia only smiled faintly. Prayer doesn't change a story that was already written. It only hopes the reader's kind. And then she stood. That night, she didn't return to the room above the chapel. Dean found her instead in the old cemetery, standing before the grave of a child who never existed. There was no name on the stone, just a date, 1851, a date Olivia had never seen, yet somehow had drawn, once years ago, in charcoal beneath her bed. It had meant nothing at the time, but now she understood. That was the year he had been created, the name she had whispered at the well. Not a brother, not a friend, something else. A boy made of guilt and shadow, birthed from the moment a child realized loneliness could be shaped into something that spoke back. A boy no one remembered. Because he had been imagined so vividly, even the world itself believed it had erased him. Dean placed his hand on the gravestone. "You were trying to save yourself," he said. Olivia's voice trembled. "I think I was trying to give someone else a voice, but I didn't know what it would cost." The earth beneath the stone shifted. Dean pulled her back instinctively, and as he did, a thin crack split the grave's surface. It didn't break. It opened, like a mouth forming a question. A single breath escaped. No sound, just breath. Olivia clutched her chest. "He's not done." Dean shook his head. "Then what does he want?" She looked at him. "He wants to count. But the ledger is gone." She didn't respond, because she knew better. That night she returned to the barn. It had been boarded up since their departure, left to weather under the Colorado sun, but when she arrived, the doors were already open. No breeze, no signs of entry, just an invitation. She stepped inside. The air was stale, quiet, no whispers, until she reached the center. There, sitting neatly atop a bale of hay, was the ledger, unburned, unmarked, rewritten. Only one page remained. Blank at the top, a line had been scrawled in black ink, childlike, uneven. "For the ones we forgot twice." Olivia opened the book. Her hands did not tremble. She tore the last page from the spine, then she turned it over, and there, etched in red, not ink but memory, was a name she had never said aloud, a name older than her drawings, older than her voice, a name that had waited. She whispered it, and the barn exhaled. Not wind, not sound, a pressure, a push from within the walls, like the structure had lungs and had been holding breath for over a decade. The dust lifted. The boards moaned low and long, like they remembered being trees. Light dimmed, not from the sky outside, but from the very air inside the barn. A sepia haze settled around her, as though time had bent slightly, rewinding the moment just enough to let something slip through. Olivia stood in the center, the page still in her hand. The name had not been spoken in any house, on any land, by any mouth that still drew breath, but she had remembered it, somehow, a name she had once whispered to the night sky from a bed she didn't know was burning, a name whispered not to summon, but to protect, and yet it had listened. She folded the page, tucked it against her chest, and waited. From the back of the barn came a knock, just one. Not sharp, not loud, but final. She turned slowly. The far wall, the one that once bore the scrawled question, "Where do the lost go when they are found?" was blank now, but a door had appeared in its center. Not like before. This was not the ancient groaning mouth to a field of the forgotten. This door was simple, modern, fresh wood, brass knob, too new to belong in a place like this. Olivia approached, her breath fogged in front of her. The air had gone cold again. She placed her hand on the knob. It turned easily. Inside, a room. Small square, clean, a desk, a chair, and on the desk, a single item. A mirror. But not just any mirror. She knew this one. It had once hung above her bed in Tennessee. Oval, gold-rimmed, slightly warped at the corners. She remembered staring into it when she was little, pretending the girl on the other side was someone else, someone who didn't have to count. She stepped closer, and in the glass she saw herself, but not the way she expected. The reflection didn't mimic her. It watched her, tilted its head, smiled. Olivia froze. The face in the mirror was hers. Yes, but not only hers. Its features shifted subtly, like layers of memory peeling back. Younger, older, then someone entirely else, a girl with no mouth, then a boy with hollow eyes, then a child drawn in charcoal. One by one, they cycled, the unfinished, the forgotten, the ones who had waited, and in each version, the eyes remained the same, Her eyes. The mirror cracked. A single hairline fracture bloomed across its center, silent but deep. The face inside did not react. It only mouthed something she could not hear, so she mouthed it back. And then the mirror shattered. But it didn't fall. Each shard hovered in the air, suspended in slow, liquid motion. From behind her, the barn began to shift again. Not violently, delicately, like a book closing. She turned to see the children. All of them, standing shoulder to shoulder in the doorway, not entering, watching. The girl who looked like her stepped forward, holding the torn ledger page in her tiny hand. "You said the name," the girl whispered. "You brought him back." Olivia nodded. He was never gone, only waiting. The girl tilted her head. "Will you write him again?" Olivia knelt, took the page. "No," she said. "I'll write me." And she did. On the reverse side, she began not with numbers, not with names, but with memory. There was a girl once who made things too real, and when the world couldn't carry them, she carried them instead. As she wrote, the barn lightened, the boards unbent, the air returned. The mirror shards dropped silently. The children faded one by one, and when the final one was gone, so was the door. The barn was empty, not just of children or pages or whispers, but of presence. The hum was gone. The warmth beneath the floor vanished. The scent of burnt wood, of ink, of dreams too long kept gone. Olivia stood alone in silence. No movement, no breeze, just stillness so complete it rang in her ears, and in her hands the page remained. No longer torn, no longer stained. Just words. Her words. She walked to the center of the barn and sat where the circle used to be. Not to summon, not to count, but to remember. For a long time she said nothing. Just breathed, just existed in a space that had once nearly unmade her. Then finally she spoke. Not aloud, but inside herself. She addressed the thing she had named. The boy from before. "I didn't know," she said in her thoughts. What naming would do. What remembering would keep alive. And from the corners of her mind, something stirred. Not dark, not monstrous. Familiar. "You didn't just name me," the voice said. "You gave me." She nodded, tears rising. "Because I needed someone." "I know," the voice answered. "But now it's time." "For what?" "To let you be real." She folded the page and held it close to her chest. Her breath hitched. "Will you go?" she asked. "No," the voice said. "I'll stay, but not like before. I won't need a shape now, or a name. I'll just be part of you, the part that remembers." The words settled in her, like ash, like comfort. Outside, the sun had moved. Long shadows stretched from the fields. Evening light filtered in soft and amber. Olivia rose and looked one final time at the walls of the barn. They were still. She stepped out into the fading warmth of Red Rock Hollow. Dean was waiting. He stood near the gate, arms crossed tightly, face drawn with worry. When he saw her, he didn't smile. He just opened his arms, and she walked into them. No words were spoken, no explanation was asked. That night, they didn't speak of names or doors or the circle. They ate in silence, like people who had endured different storms but met in the same wreckage. Before sleep, Olivia took the page, the one she had written on, the one that now held only her, and slid it beneath her pillow. She dreamed of nothing, no fields, no faces, just breath. The next morning, Pastor March knocked. His face was pale. He carried something in his hand. A letter, no return address, no handwriting, only a wax seal shaped like an open eye. Olivia's blood turned cold. She opened it slowly. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Typed, tidy, no name, no greeting, just one line. The number has begun again. Dean took the page, read it, and sat down heavily. "Who sent this?" he whispered. Olivia didn't answer, because deep inside, she knew. It hadn't been sent. It had been remembered. Somewhere, another child had found a ledger, or drawn on the floor, or whispered in a dark room that things felt missing, and the echo had answered. The pattern always returned, because the story wasn't about her. It was about naming, about the human need to give shape to the formless. And once that shape had voice, it remembered the giver. Olivia walked to the window. The morning fog curled over the fields. Somewhere out there, another barn waited. Another whisper would rise, and someone else would listen. But Red Rock Hollow was quiet. For now. The days that followed blurred together. Olivia kept to herself. Dean worked quietly beside her, as if fearing sound might reawaken something best left buried. Pastor March didn't visit again. Not after the sealed letter. Not after what they didn't say. He knew enough to recognize the weight of silence that carried memory, and the weight hadn't lessened. Every so often, Olivia would catch her reflection in the window pane. Not in mirrors, those she had covered with cloth. But in the soft blur of glass, she'd see her outline, and sometimes the suggestion of someone behind her. Not visible, not threatening, just watching. The presence never spoke, but it never left. On the fifth night, Olivia opened the ledger once more. The page was blank again, as if her words, the ones she had written with such finality, had been read, acknowledged, and turned. She ran her fingers over the surface. Nothing came up, but the page felt heavy. A weight beyond ink, like it carried something waiting to be seen but not shown. Her eyes welled up, unbidden. "You're still here," she whispered, and the silence that followed did not deny it. Dean found her at dawn, sitting in the chapel alone, the ledger in her lap. He didn't speak, just sat beside her, hands folded, staring at the altar. He looked so tired, so much older than he had when they arrived. "She's watching again," Olivia said. Dean nodded. "I don't think she ever stopped," he replied. They sat there until morning became afternoon. The sky outside dimmed with an overcast that hadn't been forecast. The wind came low, crawling over the earth rather than above it. A smell of ash returned to the air, subtle but undeniable. And then the bell tolled. Not the chapel's, a different bell, deeper, one neither of them had heard since Tennessee. Olivia stood immediately. "No," Dean whispered. "We sealed it. We burned the books. We never said the names again." But Olivia was already walking, not away from it, but toward it, because the sound wasn't summoning. It was warning. At the edge of Red Rock Hollow, a single figure stood. A boy, barefoot, eyes grey. He held no book, no letter, just a small piece of paper, clenched tight in his fist. Olivia approached, breath caught. She didn't ask his name. She already knew it. It was hers. He opened the paper slowly and handed it to her. One word was written in charcoal, in crooked, childlike letters. "Begin." And on the back, a drawing of the barn, of the circle, of the black tree with its arms outstretched. Dean caught up, chest heaving. He looked down at the paper, and for a moment he said nothing. Then quietly, with horror buried in resignation, he spoke. "It's not a cycle." Olivia turned. "What do you mean?" "It's not repeating." He looked up. "It's spreading." The air turned colder. The boy was gone. No footsteps, no trace, only the drawing remained. But something had changed. The tree in the sketch, its limbs were longer now. They touched the top of the paper, as if reaching, as if growing. Olivia turned the page over. The word "begin" was gone, replaced by another. Again. The wind picked up. Behind them, the bell tolled once more, and somewhere across the land, in another town, another name was whispered in a child's voice to an empty room. And something answered. It always answered. Because names were not just sounds. They were keys. Memory, intent, and when spoken with enough need or fear, they opened more than doors. They opened places where time didn't move forward or back, but sideways, where stories folded into each other and waited for someone to believe in them again. That was how it survived. Not through blood, not through curse, but through the human need to understand the inexplicable by giving it a name. In Red Rock Hollow, Olivia stood in the same barn where it began. The circle was gone, but the outline had returned, faint, damp, fresh. No one had drawn it, not with chalk, not with ash. It had simply risen again, as if the ground remembered more than those who walked upon it. She stood over it, the torn page in her hand. Dean entered behind her, silent. He held the ledger. Only now it was different. The cover was no longer scorched. It gleamed, black and gold, the edges laced with something that shimmered when light struck it, almost like breath. He handed it to her. "No more writing," he said. "No more counting." She nodded, but her hands still reached for it, because something in her blood, in her marrow, still itched with the need to name. She opened to the final page. Blank again, and in the center, written in a hand that was not hers, "When the counter forgets, the story stops." Her breath caught. Dean whispered, "What happens when the story ends?" She didn't answer, because it didn't. That was the curse. There was no ending, only forgetting and remembering and the space between them. She knelt at the edge of the outline, and for the last time, she spoke. "I see you." The barn grew still, not the haunted stillness of before, but a final breath. A surrender. The air warmed, and for the first time there was no whisper, no echo, only the soft sound of hay settling around her. She tore the page from the book and set it ablaze with a single match. The flames licked gently, curling black into gold, until there was nothing but dust. She scattered it over the circle, and the outline faded. She turned to Dean. "It's done." He didn't speak, just nodded. They walked from the barn, hand in hand. The door didn't creak when it closed. It didn't need to. It was finished. 3 weeks later, Red Rock Hollow suffered its worst storm in 50 years. Lightning split the ground where the barn once stood. The structure burned to its foundation. The next morning, only ash remained. No circle, no door, no names, only charred earth and quiet. Dean and Olivia moved east. They bought no land, built no home. They stayed nowhere longer than a season, and though they never spoke of the ledger again, they kept one thing between them, a single page Olivia had rewritten from memory. Not a name, not a drawing, just 6 words. "Not all that's counted is real." They pinned it inside every door they slept beneath, until the day they didn't need to anymore. Years passed, decades. Children grew and forgot. But sometimes, on windless dawns, in places where memory lingers longer than reason, a whisper could still be heard. Not malicious, not cruel, just curious, counting, softly, backwards, from 6, from 5, from 4, from 3, from 2, from 1. And then, nothing.